From winning 2 championship titles back-to-back to starting off the season with the forbidden F1 curse hanging over his head, it seems like Max Verstappen's got a lot to look out for in the 2023 season. For starters, he claimed victory in the Bahrain Grand Prix. And if you ask me, the first race of the season didn't feel any different from all the races in 2022. If anything, it felt like a routine rerun of his dominant control. After all, he did set a record last season when he won his second consecutive World Championship in October 2022, with 4 races to spare. And the Dutchman definitely justified his reputation this season as he claimed victory in the Bahrain Grand Prix for the first time in his F1 career. Not only that, but it was an amazing weekend for the Red Bull team as a whole, because following him was his teammate. Sergio Perez finished in second place, with the team setting a statement right at the start of the new season. And Aston Martin caught up to speed as well, with Fernando Alonso rolling back the years to finish in third position. And with that, the 41-year-old scored the 99th podium of his career. Moving on to Ferrari, Charles Leclerc was actually sitting in the third position with just 16 laps to spare. But then came a technical issue that forced him out of the race, while sending in a virtual safety car onto the track. As for Mercedes, it seems like the 2022 season was repeating for them as well, because they were definitely struggling throughout the race. While George Russell finished in 7th position, the 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, finished in 5th place. Let's just say from this point on, Verstappen already created a gap between him and the rest of the drivers on the grid, because he's pretty confident that he's for the rest of the season. According to the Dutchman, the team's got a great race package. Sure, a bunch of things are gonna change every race, and there are some tiny details to look out for, but they've got this. Right from his very first acceleration, the 2-time world champion was already first in line. Meanwhile, Leclerc was making his way to 2nd position, splitting the 2 Red Bull teammates. But it only took about another 10 laps for Verstappen to gain a competitive edge, which only seemed to get better with the first round of pit stops. And right after Perez overtook Leclerc right before the race's halfway point, things only seemed to get better for the Red Bull team. And chasing them was Mercedes and Aston Martin, as the 4 teammates kept exchanging positions throughout the race. Having said that, while the Red Bull team was absolutely amazing, no doubt, there was another F1 team that deserves some credit, and that's none other than Aston Martin. For one, Fernando claimed his mighty podium finish, reminding everyone that even at 41, the double world champions got the competitive drive in him. Not to mention the fact that Lance Stroll wasn't even gonna be able to make it to the race. After a terrible bike injury hardly a week or so before the race weekend, doctors told him he might not be back on the grid for a long time. In fact, they weren't expecting full recovery before the Grand Prix in Australia or so. And that's when the team had to call someone else in to replace him. Now, the F2 champion, sitting as a reserve driver, replaced him for pre-testing. But despite the excitement of his F1 debut, they possibly couldn't risk starting off the season with an inexperienced F1 driver. So rumor has it, they reached out to an old friend, Sebastian Vettel. That's right, even though he retired hardly 3 months ago, wrapping up his F1 career for good, it seems like the team was hoping for a comeback, and fans were hyped. But we were also ready to see it fall apart because Vettel left on some very serious terms, and I don't think he'd be ready to negotiate. And it didn't help that the Aston Martin team boss wasn't ready to confirm or deny anything. Anyway, guess who decided to swoop in at the last minute? Lance Stroll. Yep, he wasn't gonna risk his F1 race seat, now was he? Even though, let me tell you, his wrists were on fire, but it was definitely worth it, at least for him. And it all worked out in the end. So here's to hoping we see the best of the F1 driver throughout the season. And with Fernando's amazing performance, the team's hoping to slowly make it to one of the top teams. Sure, it's gonna be super difficult to overcome that gap in just on-season, but Formula One is super unpredictable. Not to mention, there's something else Verstappen needs to worry about. There's an F1 curse that'll be hanging over his head for the rest of the season. Alright, so this might sound absurd, but hear me out. There's some sort of incredible omen in the sport ever since 2017. Simply put, there's this specific pattern that for the past 6 seasons, the winner of the opening race never wins the world championship. That's right. So even though Verstappen won the opening race in style, it might not have been the best thing for him. In fact, that's exactly why fans think Hamilton might have a shot at the championship title after all. Not to mention that F1 is a marathon and not a sprint. And there are a bunch of races left to overtake the Red Bull driver. And let me just add that Hamilton isn't the only F1 driver who's the biggest rival for the Dutchman. Fans believe that Alonso's gonna give a pretty good competition this season too, and might even win his 3rd ever F1 title. And that's gonna be the first ever since 2006. Honestly, Formula One is super unpredictable, and that's the fun of it. So you can't really predict everything from just one race. All I can say, keeping the F1 curse aside, is that Red Bull and Aston Martin is off to a great start. And while Ferrari and Mercedes are chasing the teams, it's only a matter of time before we see whether they'd be able to overtake them. After all, Hamilton's not done yet. After the first winless season of his F1 career, he's back for a record-breaking 8th championship title. Although with how the first race went, I gotta say, he needs to bring his game up. For starters, his contract is supposed to end as we wrap this year up, and a lot of fans figured that after the terrible 2022 season, maybe the 7-time world champion was planning on retiring after all. In fact, when Daniel Ricciardo was offered the reserve driver role for 2023, rumor has it he was supposed to replace Hamilton in 2024 after his contract was up. But as soon as the rumor made headlines, he made it pretty clear that he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, to double up on that, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff came forward to confirm that the two were negotiating a multi-year contract over the winter break. And so, fans thought he wasn't gonna rest until he got the 8th World Championship title after all. But we haven't gotten any official announcement about his contract yet, which quite frankly has left a lot of fans feeling confused. Is he gonna be the biggest rival for Verstappen for a couple of more seasons? Or is this his last one? I don't know yet. Guess we gotta wait to find out. Until then, here's everything you needed to know about Verstappen's spectacular win in the opening race of 2023.
You can see how quickly it changes again when you go to a completely different track layout.